Check, 1, 2. This is Mr. Nobody. Podcast number 8. Infinity. What is my problem? Seriously. What is my problem? For about 2 years, I couldn't even look at my son's photograph. Whenever I encountered one, I'd have a bad few minutes. These days, we call that being triggered. But let's just say I'd have a bad few minutes. Seeing his eyes and the shape of his face, his mouth, his nose, his expression, matching the expression on his face to what and who I knew him to be. You know, like people are a little different when they're posing, even non-posing, than they are when you catch them unaware of themselves. Once in a while, I would take a picture of my son without him realizing it, just to see the real him, or catch a moment where it wasn't about anything, but just seeing him. So I've been asking myself questions. That's a lot of what this is about. And seeing what answers come out. What is my problem, really? For one thing, I have to be honest that I haven't had a relationship with anyone else in my life like I did with my son. And I know there's some other fathers out there who know what I'm talking about.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
I have a daughter, and we have a very intense and honest rapport and deep love for each other. What I had with my son was something like a mirror where, I don't know if it's true, but I felt so closely his pain and his happiness and his triumphs and his failures, at least insofar as when he shared them with me, or I observed them, or I observed them. I'll give you one example. When he was a boy, maybe 8 years old, I took him to a playground in the small town we were living in, to the school playground. Maybe I was even picking him up after school. I had to really alter my life significantly to be able to raise my kids. It just wasn't an easy thing, getting them to school and picking them up. I wanted to be there for that. I adjusted my life. I did this by teaching guitar lessons and painting houses. And if I taught 10 lessons a week, I could survive. And if I taught 15, I was basically making the living that I'd be making doing labor, you know? So I created that kind of experience for myself. And it worked for a while, until things changed. Do what I had to do. Anyway, we were on the playground, and you know when you're watching your kids on the playground, there's real dramas going on, real power plays, real politics. And there was this bigger kid who was in the same grade as my son, but he was much bigger than him. And this kid was being a little fucking shit, taking over the monkey bars or the area where the slide was. And I could tell that he was just exerting his physical dominance. I can't say I've ever seen my son truly angry, like really mad. He would sort of keep that inside, or I never saw him get really angry. But I looked across the playground, and my son was standing at the bottom of the slide. And there's kids running all over the place, but he's standing still. And something must have happened, because he was glowering up at this kid. This bigger kid who was being a little shit. And my son, who was significantly smaller than this guy, waited. He had a look on his face that was unfamiliar to me. What's this? And whatever happened a few moments before, which I had missed, was about to resolve itself. Something was going to happen. I could tell. My son started moving to get to the area where the kid was coming down the slide. Because that's what he was. He was being a fucking bully. The bully was coming down the slide and did not see my son, although my son was right there. I could tell that he was oblivious, that whatever he had done or been doing might not even have been directed at my son, whatever it was. And so the bully comes down the slide, and I see my son close the distance between him. And before he's got both feet on the ground, my son viciously attacked him and hit him several times, hard, in the side and in the back, as he was trying to run away. And this kid was shocked. There was something in the way that he took the hits that indicated that he knew he had earned them. And I had never seen my son do anything like this. And what came over him and motivated him as a child was something completely authentic. And I recognized it in the moment it was happening, because I did not recognize my son or who I thought my son was, but I saw who he was. Because of justice. But that's not the point. The point is that we often do not see people for who they are. We only layer ourselves over them and see them through a filter, a gauze, a lens that isn't who they are at all, but who we think they are and who we think we are. That's pretty interesting, because maybe we don't even see ourselves. Maybe we still look at ourselves the way I looked at my son most of the time, without really seeing who he was, but just who I wanted him to be. And maybe we look at ourselves and we think we know ourselves, but in truth, it's just a projection of who we wish we were, how we wish we were. And that if we saw the truth, it would be too difficult, too painful. I don't know. One thing about my son's death is I stopped giving a shit about a lot of things. I cut myself off from almost everybody. No, let me clarify that. I cut myself off from everybody.
Thank you for your patience. Please hold on.
I'd have conversations with people just to let them know that I was okay, but not really talking to them, not really sharing myself. Somehow through that process, or that effect of my son's self-destruction, I started to question everything about myself. Maybe I wasn't such a good father, after all. Maybe I didn't have such great answers for how to live life, after all. Maybe I didn't know shit. I also felt that, and I think I still do feel, that I have nothing really to share. Because if I could not dissuade my son from something like what he did, then what have I got to offer anybody? Nobody's going to listen to anybody. They're going to do what they want. And that's it. gets deeper than that too, because to just be a compliant person or personality is not always the best thing. It's not always the right person that you want in a particular position. The world needs assertive, individualistic people. I'm one of them. In other words, I'm not a personality that's been very compliant all the time. I've had to hack my own paths through thickets, through areas where people said, no, that's not real, that's not a good way to go. My paths included a lot of floundering, petty theft, trying to take shortcuts. That never works out. I used to steal food. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong. To take something that wasn't given to me or that I didn't earn. At a certain point, I got so sick of myself, disgusted, knowing that I was better than that I swore that I would never steal ever again. It's funny how we lie to ourselves. It's funny how we lie to ourselves. We're apes. We're fucked up. But that's an excuse. We're rational apes. We can make choices. We're apes. Shit. I have a confession. It's complicated. You know how sometimes we live more than one life at a time? Sometimes it's like 3 lives. We're really respectable in one way, but not so respectable in other ways. And sometimes this is not just 2 things, but multiple things. Like the way a hand has 5 fingers. I decided to go to school because after, just floundering in the real world where people were just trying to encounter too many people without skill trying to talk their way into careers, while people with skills seemed to be doing pretty well because they had focus, they had those skills, not just the desire for those skills. So I decided I would go to the university here in the city. And it was kind of a rough start, I must say, because I didn't have the shots I needed. I didn't have my taxes done. I didn't have a license to drive my car, which I was going to need. I didn't have my shit together. And I had an epiphany right before this time when I was trying to get this major work as an actor, and even getting calls. I got a call from these guys who were in the business saying, hey, send your stuff, we have you in mind for something. And then I didn't hear back from them. And these were people I knew. And I was in a cab about a month later with the agent who was not full of shit. And I said, what is it with these guys? Do they ever get anything going on? And she said to me, no. Straight up, no. And I didn't ask why. I said, is it because they're stoned all the time? And before she thought about it, she said yes. So it's like somebody jumped on a giant pull cord and the light bulb went off. And I realized I could not align myself with stoners who were full of talk. Or if I did so, it was at my own peril. And these were nice people. These were talented people, but they were also full of shit. Yeah. So I was like, fuck it. I'm going to go to school like the way my wonderful guitar teacher, who was already in his 70s at this point, said, hey, come there. I teach as an adjunct. It all sounded pretty amazing. Yeah. Well, what ensued was quite a lot of restructuring of how I thought things should be. And I guess I got through that part of it and got into the groove of what it meant to supplicant myself, is that a word? To others, to a curriculum, to expectations that were required of me, instead of me imposing upon the world my rules and my style. It took about 2 years, hardcore school, before I realized I needed to do what they were asking, not what I thought they were asking, or what I wanted them to be asking. It was pretty awesome, I gotta say. I was in my 30s, and here's the thing. I was composing music for theater pieces. I had a big success in the, let's just say, off-Broadway world. And I was selling pot. I was selling weed. And I was being a stay-at-home dad some of the time. And I was doing gigs at night. I feel a little bad about the selling pot. I really do, because I just do. I don't know. I put up a wall, you know what I'm talking about? Like a barrier where I said, well, it's not killing anybody, and it's not, so fuck you, hardcore drug dealers. And yada yada. I think I have to stop there. Because even though it wasn't killing anybody, and I wasn't smoking at the time, so that was my other equivocation is, I'm not using it, I'm just supplying it to people who need it. Oh, man. And I had decided I would have a small group of people that I provided for. And so I did. And I was a drug dealer for a while. And I do feel a little guilty about that. remember telling my clients, if that's what you want to call them, don't get your life together. Because if you do, you won't be using this stuff. And they used to look at me wild-eyed when I'd say that. And they'd sort of laugh, but they knew I was being honest, that I was being truthful, and that outside of all of my self-deception, that it was leaking, that I knew, because I could see what their lives were like. And sometimes their lives looked like a complete fucking mess. And sometimes they looked very functional. But I knew that they did not have it together, just like me. And a big part of it was their marijuana smoking, because we talked about it. We talked about it pretty honestly. And in my own experience, in my own life, I enjoyed smoking weed a lot. But I know that the years in which I did so were not very productive years. They were years that I could call productive if I wanted to do some gymnastics, but they're not anywhere near as productive as the years where I wasn't smoking and being stoned all the time. Because I don't know about you, but when I decide to do something, I do it all the time. Just like some of my other bad habits, I do it all the time. And it takes a lot of self-reflection to change yourself. It took a lot of self-reflection to change myself. Okay. So that's my big confession. Of course, I'm leaving out plenty of shit, but I'm really telling you the crucible of something I feel some difficulty with, which my son died from drugs, and I sold marijuana, which you would say, so fucking what? But it is a big deal. So I'm just making a connection between my own drug use, my dealing, and my son's death. And I also know from my experience that the kids on the playground get to be their real selves. And all we do in our adolescence and adulthood is cover that up and fuck that up and destroy that to not be here. Thanks for listening. Roll the tune. finish.